Hey guys, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Minecraft Let's Build. Today's episode will be a bit longer than usual because, well, two reasons really. One, it's my birthday and I'm feeling, well, I'm up to it. And secondly, somebody submitted a topic. Huzzah! Tominorge submitted a topic, but or for me to discuss, but we'll get into that later. First of all, let's give you a bit of a tour of the almost finished product. So remember, this was what I used to get on the roof. There used to be a block here. I closed it up because I'm done roofing. I've also, added a bit of lighting. I still need to finish off this. I want to make a staircase down a bit. And we'll see what happens from there. Extra oven for more, or extra furnace for more capacity. The roof is finished. I love the atmosphere, like the lighting this place has. Check that out. That's exactly what I was going for. And during the day, more light filters through the windows, so it's nice. Now down here were a few rooms. I've added this extra bit of structure. Obviously it's not all done yet, but I'm getting there. And this is for two reasons. One, because the structure as it was looked a bit chubby, so I added this to help that out a bit. Maybe I'll add another wing over here. We'll see. Yeah, pigs. I hate pigs. Die. So yeah. And I add a little thing up top there, just for the lulz. So as you can see over here, I still need to finish off this side. I'm not done. I'll just keep it short, keep it simple. And here's where I want to add that staircase, either going straight down and make the hall even longer, or wind around and come down the side. And, yeah, I might make a little bit of a garden down here after I exterminate all the pigs, which keep spawning. They spawn over in the swamp and they keep coming over this way. So I may have to unleash my wrath upon them. See, pig here, pigs everywhere. See, go away, pigs. Seriously, leave me alone. So yeah, that's that. I really love the lighting. So yeah. So the topic submitted by tominorge. So tominorge is a personal friend of mine. We go to school together. We have for the past few years, and we live in Norway, and that really rubbed off here on the structure, as I mentioned in previous episodes. He thought so too, so he wanted me to discuss Vikings. Now, I don't know if you wrote a long list of vague topics, put them all in a hat and pulled one, and this is what you left me with, but, hey, I'll try. I can't promise it'll be an amazing commentary, but, because I'm not exactly a doctor in Vikingology. No, I know it's not such a... Whatever, who cares? But I'll tell you a bit of what I do know. And what he wanted to know was like daily life activities, plunder and pillage, all that good stuff. Just a general overview of the Vikings. Which, it's kind of like saying, oh yeah, just discuss the Romans, go. You can't do that in a 10-minute video. So that's really the reason why this video is going to be a lot longer. And while I talk about the Vikings, I will also be working. So it's not all just fluff. This video will be productive, I promise. So yeah, the Vikings. Who are the Vikings? What do they want? Where do they come from? Huzzah. The Vikings are just really what it boils down to is a very general term for the Germanic peoples living in Scandinavia in the beginning of the Iron Age. And they're not exactly what people think they are. The image a lot of us have of these big burly men wearing horned helmets, that's not who they were. Not exactly at least. I mean, there were no horns on the helmets. The Vikings are very complex people, or were a very complex people. And let's see how to go about this. And, even the term Viking, it's not exactly. It's they never called themselves Vikings. There were many I guess you could tribes at the time, which made up what we know as the Vikings today, and they were all Germanic tribes. And we know this because the mythology of most German tribes and that of the Vikings is either extremely similar or same fluff, different package. So just pretty much exactly the same, just different names for gods, festivals, rituals, and whatnot. The actual term Viking comes from Icelandic, from the phrase fara I viking, which means to go on an expedition. And to say that they were an adventurous people would be a bit of an understatement. Archaeologists and smart people in general have found traces of the Viking civilization as far south as Morocco, as far east as Baghdad. They found traces of Viking culture and weapons and just artifacts as far as the Caspian Sea, which if you pull up a map and trace your finger from Norway, Sweden, or just Scandinavia, just even to that area, I didn't believe it myself at first, because it's a long way. But the tools they had to get there makes it very plausible. And, these people kind of dig for a living, and they find all kinds of fun toys like swords and helmets and whatnot, and every now and then a ship. And so, seems legit, right? So, who were these, or like, who were they? Where do they come from? All that good stuff. Well, the original Vikings, and we'll establish the meaning of original Vikings as being the people which we commonly refer to as Vikings. And they originally came from Scandinavia. So Norway, Denmark, Sweden, all that good stuff. So you may be wondering, what the hell were they doing all the way over in as far as Iraq and the Stans? Well, the Vikings were originally a very peaceful people who farmed and traded. And like any trading civilization, the further you go, the more exotic things you can bring back. And originating from these you know, small tribes around Skagerrak, which is the sea, or which is the name of the sea between Denmark and Norway, came these people, and they weren't like a lot of times movies and whatnot will portray them as barbarians and whatnot, but it couldn't be any further from the truth. These were well-cultured, well-educated, socially advanced people. Um, and there's no other explanation for them being able to reach as far as they did. Examples of this are, you know, just their colonization efforts in Europe. So they started in Scandinavia and the beginning of the Iron Age. And within about 100 or so years, they made their way to Northern Europe and started settling under a huge number of different names. Then they made their way to Western Europe, and we'll get into specifics later. And then they made their way to Britain, Greenland, and Iceland. They made it as far as the Americas, and into the Mediterranean. And these were very industrious people, hardworking people. Yet a lot of times they're just kind of skipped over in the history books because, well, they didn't leave behind huge cities. Or did they? A lot of modern day cities were actually Viking settlements. For example, the capital of Ireland, Dublin, was originally built by, or settled by, the Vikings. As was York in England, Aarhus in Denmark, and Normandy. If you look at the name Norman, so the people coming from that region in France, well, it doesn't sound very French, does it? It doesn't sound like something that will come out of a Romance language. And if you're guessing, oh, well, that's because it's not, well, brownie points to you. Norman, well, I can't really get any more of a literal translation than Northman. And they were exactly that, men from the north. The Vikings, how to put this, populated the area in northern France in the not the middle of the Iron Age, so around 700 to 800 BC, or AD. And even more evidence of this is the town Le Havre, which means comes from Norse haven, which is harbor. So surprise, surprise. Anything with haven is most likely, or anything in Europe with like in Britain or whatnot, with the word haven at the end, was most likely a Viking settlement. So the Normans were as were the Saxons, and because the Saxons from Denmark, and so on, which invaded and pillaged Britain in the Middle Ages, or very, very, very early Middle Ages, and later became British, were by definition Vikings. And a lot of this is, you can recognize a lot of this in culture from the different regions. While a lot of British culture is indigenous, a lot of it was brought over by the Saxons. And just about everybody else that pillaged, plundered, and settled the British Isles. But we still haven't answered the question we started out with: who were the Vikings? And I really apologize for dragging this out. As I mentioned earlier, the Vikings started out as a peaceful people, mostly occupied with farming and trade. Now, this trade brought with it something which the world had never really seen before, and that was the longship. Never before was there a ship which could do what the longship did, or had the characteristics which the longship had. The longship, as most of you know from cartoons and whatnot, um, was had a how to say this in English? Uh, excuse me. Had a shallow keel, which meant it could transverse shallow bodies of water, yet a wide beam, meaning it could travel open bodies of water as well. So what does this mean? Well, the Vikings had the perfect tool for exploration and trade and so on and so on. Basically, a Swiss Army knife of ships at the time. It could go anywhere you could go. And because they were built the way they were light enough to be carried by hand. Which meant that when the Vikings went to explore or to the east, they were able to sail up the Neva in Russia, and then transfer their boats over onto the what is it called, Volga, and continue their journey without having many if any, there we go, problems. Now this may not sound like much of a achievement, but you need to understand that at the time the only real other seafaring peoples were the Romans, and if you read your history books, they weren't exactly around anymore. Of course, you had the Byzantines, which had taken over from the Romans, but at this time, what was left of the Roman Empire, east and west, was still in a state of chaos from the fall and sacking of Rome. Even with Constantine in the east, the empire was still fractured at this point. So that left an opening for these Norman, or Vikings, to explore for themselves instead of yeah. Now, the reason we see Vikings as we do these days, as raiding and pillaging marauders, is because yes, there was a bit of raiding and pillaging involved. The earliest of which occurred in England. I can't remember the exact name of the place, please forgive me. But it happened around, I believe it was 700, 750, sometime around there. And it was a monastery. Well, what better target could you ask for than a monastery if you're after gold? There's lots of it, and the monks aren't exactly going to fight back, because, well, they're monks. So that opened up a new era for the Vikings, where they would go raiding. And they raided anywhere from Britain to the south of Europe, all the way into inland Russia along the rivers. And this period was so, and the Vikings were so influential at this point in trade that we still use some of their names for the peoples which they'd come across today. For example, the Slavs. Slav, slave, do the math. And it was really at this point in time that the Vikings got a rather mixed reputation. Yes, they were amazing craftsmen, and you know, very cultured people, but what they were doing was seen as barbaric by, we'll just say, the West, for just because it's a bit easier than explaining. By we'll say our standards. However, the human trade was just another form of trade at the time. Until very recently, actually, slavery was, well, almost a normal thing. However, the Vikings were so good at it that the reputation stuck. As a matter of fact, Dublin was started as a slave trading post. So it goes to show you how good they were at their jobs. Anyways, so yeah, about their culture. Aside from raiding, and pillaging, and plundering, and burning, and raping, and so on and so on, the Vikings also developed a very rich culture, ranging from craftsmanship, as you can see in many longships, to the written sagas, which are found mostly in Iceland, as well as back here, and the runestones, which are left all over the place. And these two had quite an influence on a lot of people, both at the time as well as later. So much so that, for example, the Nazis used these runes wait a second. Use these runes as kind of emblems for their, you know, occult stuff. As much as I'd love to get into it, that's probably for another video, because there's a lot to talk about if we get into that. So yeah, for example, the SS had the two thunderbolts, which weren't exactly thunderbolts. They were actually the Norse rune Sig, which meant, or the Germanic rune Sig, which stood for victory. Now, it's little things like this. Something's not right here. 1, 2, 3. Wait a second. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that belongs there. Okay. So it's little things like these that they left behind that give us a little bit of an insight into who they were, and even their mythology that they left behind. These pagan, what's the word? Rituals and whatnot. They still kind of stick. You know. Again, I mentioned earlier that a lot of the Vikings were Germanic peoples, so they shared a lot of the other Germanic festivals like Halloween, Halloween, summer solstice, winter solstice, and so on and so on, as well as various harvest festivals, which were taken over by the church and rebranded as non-pagan holidays, and then given a new name, obviously, and are still celebrated today, like, for example, Halloween. And you know, it's little things like this that really you know, or at least makes me think just how much influence these peoples had over the rest of the world, or the known world at the time. What else is there? So yeah, yeah, that's about it for the Vikings, really. Without going into specifics. I'll continue working this. I think this will become like a mess area. Yeah, that or a library, one of the two. And by next video, I will have the floor plan done. I'll try not to work on it too much like I did last time, because then you come back and it's kind of done. And that's no fun. So yeah, I hope this kind of filled what you wanted to hear about. I know it was a bit vague here and there, and I may not have covered everything you wanted to hear. I apologize for that, but narrow it down, please. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. See ya.